And I've been honing in on a certain idea or homing in on a certain idea since I wrote my book, probably. And the idea has been revolving around resilience. And when I'm with my military audience, I often will say that resilience, like I hate the word resilience. And for especially senior military leaders, they look at me like I just dropped probably the worst four-letter word in the universe because I don't like the word resilience. And the reason I don't like resilience is because honestly, I'm just not a big fan of buzzwords at all. And I think a lot of people feel that way, right? Where it's like you hear the word resilience a million times, or you've talked about suicide so many times, or you've had the same briefing and you see the same guy who tells you not to put the CD with the MP3s into your government computer. And after a while, we just get tired of hearing it. And for me, with resilience, I think it really comes down to that, which is like I'm tired of hearing about it. And I think more specifically, I'm tired of watching the solutions that get implemented. I think that that's a big part of it. It's like I end up despising the solutions that get implemented because they're not practical or they don't scale or they're not hyper effective. And a lot of times it feels like it's made for the wrong audience. And when I say that it's made for the wrong audience, it's like we sit around doing kumbaya and breathing techniques and all these things that are inherently valuable. Innately, there's value in them. And I don't deny that. Like I don't deny the value. But what I often think is like, is it the right use, the proper use of our time? Is it the most effective use of our time? Like we know that when it comes to suicide, one of the number one factors is personal finance and relationships. And we know that in divorce, personal finance is one of the biggest contributors to divorce, let's say. So we can talk about breathing factors, which may help me when I'm in the midst of arguing with my wife over money. But if I'm not focusing my efforts and my time on something that's going to improve our marriage or improve our finances, then I'm missing the mark. And I think that a lot of times what ends up happening is it's like we don't mandate personal finance coaching. We don't create personal finance coaches in our military ecosystem. We don't make those types of activities mandatory because we have an organization, Airmen and Family Readiness, let's say in the Air Force, that's designed to deal with those things. And so people can volunteer and go get help the same way people can volunteer and go get mental health help. And so what quite often happens is that our resources are shifted towards the urgent rather than the preventative. And I think that's a huge problem. And one of the things that I want to leave my mark, and I'm homing in on this, is like this is where I'm really starting to focus the majority of my attention is this gap that we have between everyday life, go to work, come home, do my best. And in the Air Force, we have a term called ACE, Ask, Care, Escort, which is if we think that somebody's in danger, then we ask if they're in danger, we care about what they say, and we escort them to the proper treatment facility or to the right agency to help them. And I think ACE is great. Like everybody remembers it. I've seen people ACE. I've had people ACE me. Like I've seen it in use and it works. But there's a missing link between everyday life and ACE. And I think that there's a solution, and I don't think that we're hitting it yet. We have this tool. It's called the 5 Circles of Influence. And the 5 Circles of Influence says basically that you have 5 rings, and starting from the inside out, concentric circles like a bullseye, they're self, family, team, organization, and community. And I often say that we focus on the outside rings because that's where we get our identity and that's where we get our sense of fulfillment, and that the 2 inside rings, self and family, sometimes they don't get our best. And our spouses may say things to us like, why don't you treat me like your airmen? Why don't you treat me like your Marines? Why don't you? And we don't always give them our best. But the one thing that is true, and this is true, you'll either, if you're a military member, you will either die or separate out of the force. One of those 2 things will happen. You'll die or you'll separate out of the force. If you didn't know that, let me be the first one to tell you. You will leave the military. No one will come with you. You'll either go to the grave or you'll go into retirement or separation, and your family, if they're still with you, will go with you. That's it. Most of the people you encountered won't remember your name. Most of the things that you've done, you will have forgotten. And I'm not shy about saying that out loud. And as we think about one of the biggest problems that plagues military members, suicide, and we think about one of the biggest problems that plagues veterans, suicide, 22 a day versus 1 every 1.5 days or so, every 2 days from military. So almost 44 times more veterans kill themselves than active duty military members. And the one thing that I know for certain is that if we look at the 5 circles of influence, self, family, team, organization, and community, if your team, organization, and community are the healthiest they've ever been, they're on fire, they're glowing, but self and family are the worst that they've ever been, you're in the danger zone. You're in the danger zone. If team, organization, and community are the healthiest they've ever been, and self and family are languishing, you're in the danger zone. But the opposite, if family and self are the strongest that they've ever been, if you're happy, if you're healthy, if you're eating, drinking, exercising, if mentally and spiritually you're where you should be, and your family is on fire, your relationship is strong and it's healthy. Team, organization, and community can kick rocks. It can be, life at work can be god awful. If my spouse loves me and my children love me and I'm happy and I'm healthy, I can weather the storm. I can find a new job. If my finances are in order, I'm not trapped and beholden to the organization. Maybe I'm locked into a contract. You can do anything for a short period of time, 2 years, 4 years, whatever it is. We have POWs have been in POW camps for 10 years or more, and they survive. You can too. But family and self, your mental, your spiritual resilience, they've got to meet you where you are in order to sustain you. There's a missing link, as I talked about in the beginning, and we have a huge part to play in that. There's the extreme where somebody's struggling and they need help, and then there's the other extreme where everything is perfect. We don't coach people on how to deal with others that aren't doing well but don't need help. We don't have a system in place for that. And I think that's the most important part to play. I want to fill that hole. So if you can help me out, let's talk about getting your people in. There's a couple of ways to do that this year. If you want to get certified, we need to come to your base, or you need to jump into one of our online courses. But it starts with you reaching out, mark@marktelsher.com. Let me know.